Good morning and welcome to the Carol Nash stand Motorcycle Live 2016. The bike you're looking at the moment is the Destiny Cycles project built for customer Alistair, and it's called the Bomber, for reasons that will become obvious when Alistair comes and talks us around it. The base of this bike is a Harley Davidson early 70s rigid wishbone frame. When Alistair came to us, he had very definite views on what he wanted from a bike. And he's also a huge fan of the Lancaster Bomber aeroplanes, which is why you'll see a lot of memorabilia on this bike, both in the decals and some of the instruments that have been used on it. It took approximately 18 months to build and was a real collaboration between owner and Destiny Cycles. And here's Alistair to tell you more about the Lancaster memorabilia.
Okay, well, I've always been a bit interested in Second World War history, and Bomber Command particularly got my interest, and I ended up picking up a few bits through the dreaded eBay also. And it just sort of came together when deciding on the bike that it seemed that one or two of the bits would work on what I'd already wanted, was a chunky, fat-wheeled big bike. So we've got a number of bits and pieces. We've got magneto switches that you'd find on Merlin engines. You'd find those in Spitfires, but Lancasters and the like, and the same with the engine starting buttons. And then we've got bomb release switches. Those would be the bomb aimer in the front of the Lancaster would have one of these in his hand, and when he pressed that, everything would go southwards, hopefully not hitting anybody below him. We've got all sorts of other bits and pieces. There are probably more than we can cover in the time here. We've got navigation lights on the back for port and starboard, and then there is a, for no other reason than my first three initials are AJL. I discovered that AJL was also the squadron marking of a Lancaster flown by Dave Shannon on the famous Dams raid. So we have AJL down here on the side, and we have an air cleaner which is styled not unlike the end of a bouncing bomb. Dave Shannon, interestingly, was only 20 years old when he flew the Dams mission. Won himself a DSO, and I think his bomb aimer Len Sumter got himself a DFC. So these guys went out, and they were probably one of thousands of people who flew missions, and the odds of their survival wasn't particularly brilliant. They were referred to as terror flyers or terror fliegers by the Germans, because needless to say, being on the receiving end of Bomber Command's deliveries was a pretty unpleasant prospect, and hundreds of thousands of people, including innocent and the guilty, died. But the odds for the air crews themselves were pretty poor. There was the Germans had an upward firing cannon on some of their night fighters which was given the code name Schlager music, which actually means jazz. But they would fly up underneath the Lancaster and then shoot up through the wings and the fuel tanks, and the thing would be out of the sky, falling with probably the loss of all 7 crew on board at a time, with giving them very little chance to bail out. So the odds, as it said there, 55,573 air crew died out of 125,000, which is not brilliant odds really. So like quite a lot of other people fighting in the war, they put up with an awful lot, which I always found quite impressive. Okay, the bike has actually a working airspeed indicator. Although it's a Second World period airspeed indicator, it's probably off a Tiger Moth rather than a Lancaster, because it only goes up to 120. But bear in mind the bike itself doesn't go quite as fast as a Lancaster, which has a diving speed of about 360 knots. It would probably be a bit unnecessary to have one of those. The headlight is an Aldis signalling lamp, the like of which used in all sorts of contexts, but also on bombers, so they could signal to each other and to the ground without giving away their position through the use of the radio.